Pat Robertson is dead, and hopefully soon to follow will be all of the bad ideas and bad politics that he has supported throughout his life. Now, he has an interesting life, and did you know that he was supported by the Bank of Scotland? Not his ministry. He got into business. There's this whole background of Pat Robertson that when I speak to my next guest about, we can be absolutely sure that he is probably accounting for in front of St. Peter at the pearly gates right now. And that is going to take, he's going to have some splaining to do if he actually wants to get in up there. If after we talk to Greg Palast, we find out he actually even believed the stuff that he was selling you. Greg Palast is the author of several New York Times bestsellers. You may know him from The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. He's also obviously an investigative reporter for BBC Television and The Guardian. We're talking with him about his investigation of Pat Robertson, the founder of the Christian Coalition and the 700 Club. Did you know that the 700 in 700 Club had to do with the amount of money that you had to give in a year to this club in order to have God love you, I guess? Anyway, he died this past week at the age of 93. They say only the good die young, so you can decide about that. Palast's expose of Robertson won the Guardian Business Story of the Year in Britain. Let's waste no more time getting into this. Welcome with me, Greg Palast. Greg Palast, thank you so much for joining me on this most joyful of sad occasions. Can we talk about whether Pat Robertson, in what ways, his barriers to entrance to heaven now that he's crossed over? You've been studying him for a long time. Talk about whether we will see him ever get through the pearly gates.
Well, that's not up to me. That's up to higher authority or the Trump campaign. For those who don't know Pat Robertson, he ran for president in 1980 against George Bush Senior, and then became the secret weapon which got Bush elected over Mike Dukakis by he created something called the Christian Coalition. It's Pat Robertson more than any other person who brought the evangelicals into the Republican Party. He is the guy, he wrote the book in 1991, New World Order, about the cabal that was created by the bankers, the communist rabbi bankers, and the
AKA Jews, right?
And the Illuminati. And but though I have to tell you, don't worry about his anti-Semitism is nothing compared to his all-out attacks on the people he considers the voices of Satan. That is Presbyterians and Hindus.
Hindus, really?
Hindus, because they're the source of the kind of New Age, the New Age philosophy, which has taken over kids. Peace, love, and justice, and Jimi Hendrix colors.
Yeah, well, it also has that idea that God is actually, present inside of you and not out there, and no one gives money if they don't need a middleman between you and the man upstairs. If he's not upstairs, there's no reason for him.
He also created, as he said, not only the Christian Coalition, like a couple million fanatics who he took from Christianity to the Republican Party. But in addition, he's the guy who really began something called the 700 Club. 700 Club means you donate $700 a year to him. And he had 1 million people signing up for this he created the first real televangelist ministries. He's a televangelist, though he hated the term, he told me. And this is a story, as you mentioned in the intro, that I did for The Guardian. I actually went undercover. Believe it or not, Pat Robertson was a fan of my writing. And because I did talk about globalization, the IMF, etc. But he sees in this a strand directly from the devil and the Illuminati. And one of the things I should note is that of course, the big part of this conspiracy was the creation of the Federal Reserve Board in America, which was created by the Senate, by the big banks, and the Senate Finance Committee. these are the instruments of the devil. And you know who was the chairman of the United States Senate Finance Committee when the Federal Reserve was created?
No.
Senator Robertson, Pat Robertson's father, who was the mentor to Prescott Bush, the grandfather or uncle of George Herbert Walker Bush. So basically, Pat Robertson has decided that it was his father who is the devil's tool.
Oh boy, I'd love to dig back.
Very interesting family history going on there. And but the thing is about in my investigation is, again, how many sacks of gold can you take in through the gates of heaven? And one of the things that Robertson did in my investigations, we found massive violations of the law at the time in politics, and also he was very good at shearing his flock of their funds. The investigation began when not the Royal Bank, but the Bank of Scotland, the oldest bank in Britain, which then became the central bank. The very first central bank on the planet was the Bank of Scotland, not the Bank of England. And that was founded by the Presbyterian leadership of Scotland, which is why he's on a violent crusade against Presbyterians. But here's the odd thing. He formed a business partnership with Bank of Scotland to create what would be the first internet bank in the world, actually. So
let me get this straight. The Bank of Scotland decided that, I believe in your word, what did you call him? Like a hayseed?
Well, as far as the British are concerned, he's just a hayseed goober. Playing on redneck stupidity to get them to empty out their bank accounts and hand it to the Bank of Scotland. But what's so interesting is that in his books, he identifies the Bank of Scotland as the specific tool of the devil, and he had a business partnership with them. By the way, my expose put an end to that partnership right away. It also shocked the federal regulators because they'd already barred. U.S. federal regulators had barred Pat Robertson from being involved in a bank.
Why would they pick Pat Robertson?
Because he knew how to fleece his flock. They figured this is the first internet bank. How are you going to get people to hand over money to a bank that doesn't exist? It doesn't have pillars and tellers, etc. Now we're so used to it, but at the time it was a novel
Bitcoin,
idea.
Right?
So the way to do it is to say God wants you to put your money in this bank.
Damn. And, talk about the diamond mines. That's the one that really got me. He got money from his people saying, I'm going to go feed the poor starving Africans. But instead he decided to buy a diamond mine instead.
Well, what happened was, and by the way, I was down, watching the Reverend Pat in Virginia Beach sell his flock on TV. He had invited me down.
What was that like?
And yeah, I should mention that the way I got him, I was able to get his words and avoid getting sued because I had his words, is I had this is before digital recording. I actually had a dinky winky miniature reel-to-reel tape recorder inside a cigarette lighter. I kid you not. And so I could get through the metal detectors to go meet with him because they obviously to get around. I said, my lighter will set off your alarms. So they took my tape recorder, but no one asked me, why did I have a lighter? But I forgot to bring a pack of cigarettes to make it look good, but I still got away with it. But so here's the story of the mines is that, so if you remember, there was the horrid massacre in Rwanda in the 80s. And so Pat Robertson got on the air and said, the Lord wants us to feed these poor people in Africa, these wounded, starving people in Rwanda. So he got millions from his flock, and he bought a little small fleet of airplanes to bring food to Rwanda. Why he needed to buy the planes, it wasn't clear, but he did. And so the cameras go on, and he shows up in Africa and Rwanda with all this food, heroic, that Jesus has brought you this manna. And then the cameras the cameras were turned off. The planes took off, and they were heavy-duty planes. They picked up heavy-duty mining equipment, and then they flew off with the Reverend to the Reverend's diamond mines in the Congo. So he actually owned diamond mines. Yes, with the money. So that's where the money went, was to buy the planes and the equipment. So after that point, the planes and the equipment were used for nothing but his personal diamond mines. And by the way, an interesting thing with that is that one of the, I talked to a lot of his insiders, associates, people that ran his finances. And what happens, these are really serious Christians, real believers who thought that they were involved in religious enterprise. What they found out is they were involved in various political and economic and financial scams. So one of his people said, I never saw Pat Robertson one time ever pray unless there was a camera on. And he never had a Bible with him. He always had the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal. But he never prayed. He said there was one exception to him praying when there were no cameras going. And that was when they were flying with the mining equipment to the Congo, to the diamond mines. He had everyone on the plane pray for diamonds.
Oh.
Dear
Lord,
I cannot
give
make
us
this
some
up.
bloody diamonds that we can sell at the K jeweler to people who are another cheap following, must have diamond in order to get married.
Well, in fact, there's another darker side to this too. I don't think.
Wait, darker than that already?
It gets darker because infamously, Pat Robertson got on his 700 Club on the air, which has millions of viewers, and called for the assassination of Hugo Chavez. And I was down in Venezuela at the time. So he said, look, this guy's sitting on our oil. We should just send in some commandos and take him out. It's time to get rid of him. And so we called for the but why Hugo Chavez? I mean, why in particular? And I found out it's because Chavez refused to give Pat Robertson a gold mining concession in Venezuela that he wanted. So
how is it? I mean, you did reporting on this at the time. I'm going to put up an image. I have an image of one of the many that beautiful piece that you have. That also you can go on your website, gregpalast.com, and read, which is amazing, and get on the mailing list. I would say, if you're not already on Greg's mailing list, because all the good stuff comes out.
By the way, it's free, and I don't inundate you. You get it something about every 3 weeks. But yes, you can read the full investigation, which was the business story of the year in Britain. That investigation, but it's as you say, it's a bit fun too. And the only time that someone's ever gotten an award, because what I was seeking to prove was that Pat Robertson, of course, is the Antichrist.
Yes, well,
I'm one of the few investigative reporters who's actually discovered the Antichrist, because after all, the Antichrist would not appear with horns and a red tail, but is likely to appear as a guy with a frock on. Yeah. And by the way, you could not call him Reverend Robertson, Reverend Pat, as everyone called him Reverend Pat Robertson. He was defrocked by the Southern Baptist Church. He's not a reverend. He was defrocked decades ago for his financial shenanigans. And so he's Dr. Robertson, but very few people know that he was actually thrown out of the Baptist Church.
This is the question that always remains with me in these cases. I just, on my Facebook feed, I have all kinds of friends, people posting, I graduated my master's degree from Regent University, and he looked me in the eyes and he prayed for me as he handed my diploma, and he changed my life. And I'm like, how do all of these people continue to trust him? It's very Trumpian. People continue to trust Trump in the face of all of the misdeeds. I don't get it.
You have to, once you're a believer, the last thing you want to find out is that the God you've been praying to, or the man who's supposed to be the voice of God, is in fact the voice of a bank account. Right. And so he ran many financial scams, and I got to tell you, his chief financial officer who quit in disgust. She said people were turning over their life savings to this man, mortgaging their houses for his business schemes. He had a pyramid scheme called um, it was a vitamin multi-level marketing scheme. In other words, a pyramid scheme. And he just fleeced his until the feds shut him down. He had been fleecing his flock for millions. And then, of course, there's the issue that this is the man who created basically the white evangelicals into the Republican Party and made them a political force by creating the Christian Coalition. Now, the way he did that, by the way, is interesting, because I asked him, I said, he had run for president
88
and lost. And I said, wait a minute, you said that the Lord told you to run for president. I said, well, with a campaign manager like that, how could you lose? And he said, well, the Lord didn't tell me to win. He told me to run. And in running, I created a mailing list of 3 million people who became the Christian Coalition. By the way, that's illegal to do, but doesn't matter. That's a minor road bump for a serial criminal. And he was. I won't sugarcoat it. And
it's
so
illegal to create a mailing list. Just
no. He was using his campaign for creating mailing lists, which for his personal profit.
Oh, then he used it for his
political power.
Got it.
But the thing is that once he created that mailing list with the Christian Coalition, as he said, you can't run for dog catcher in the Republican Party without his approval. So Pat Robertson's endorsement, whether it was for the two Bushes or for Donald Trump, his endorsement was absolutely vital to winning the evangelical vote, which means it's the only way you can win a Republican nomination. So this was the real shadow force of the Republican Party. He's the guy who politicized the evangelicals over the objection of people like Billy Graham, who said, don't do this and stay out of politics. But
wow, Billy Graham is someone
Billy Graham
look up to. Okay.
In fact, by the way, Billy Graham also said, "Get off this anti-abortion stuff. That's not in the Bible."
Wow.
So I know when we're talking about Billy Graham being kind of the sane, moderate guy, this is what we're talking about. So Pat Robertson, so he ran these this kind of vitamin marketing scheme, and of course, because he was the voice of God, how could you lose? And I would see him. I went to the 700 Club filming in Virginia Beach, and he would say, for example, on the show I was at, he said he suddenly closes his eyes. He's getting suddenly puts his head down. Oh my God, the Lord is speaking. The Lord is speaking. The Lord is saying, Michael, you have a back pain, and Michael, I am going to cure you now. Praise the Lord and call this number to show your gratitude and join the 700. Give me $700. Now think of how many guys named Michael are listening in the audience, and how many of them have some type of back pain. Now, and Pat Robertson has just cured them. The Lord has cured them through his messenger, Pat Robertson. Now, of course, you were asking the obvious question: why does the Lord need a cable TV station to get across his message? I thought he had more direct ways of speaking to people.
I was just going to ask. Yeah.
But, apparently the Lord does now, he needs his own, I'm sure.
He works in mysterious cable network ways.
Right, exactly. So
I thought one of the things that I thought was really interesting about your piece was can you talk a little bit about the sale of the Christian Broadcasting Network to guess who?
I've forgotten that.
Wasn't it Rupert Murdoch?
Yes. Oh, of course. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. He sold what we call the family network. So first of all, by the way, Pat Robertson was a kind of left-wing activist, community organizer in Bed-Stuy, New York.
My head is about to explode.
I'm telling you the truth, because remember, his father was Satan, is a right-wing Satan. Then he married a woman many, many years older than him, who was very, very rich, and gave him this cable station. And then he built it into this massive network, which he sold to Rupert Murdoch. But part of the deal is that he got to keep his 700 Club on the air, raising that $700 from each of these goobers. Now
there's so many goobers. Those numbers just are indicative of how many goobers we have.
Well, the other thing, though, is that when I talk about him getting into politics, this was against the law. Remember, the Christian Coalition was supposed to be a not-for-profit, nonpartisan organization. And so people making those donations were getting tax deductions, right? So it's tax deductible giving to the grifter. But at that time, especially, this is before Citizens United and the nonprofit equivalent, which is called Speech Now decision, which allowed some of these groups to dabble in politics. But that time it was completely and utterly illegal. So the IRS and the Justice Department, when they sent out millions and millions of letters saying Christians must support George Bush. This is George Bush Senior. Sent out millions of notes to their people to support Bush's campaign. And this is how he was able to defeat Michael Dukakis, because he was way behind Dukakis in the polls until the Christian Coalition got behind Bush. And so the IRS and Justice Department subpoenaed their records. And according to insiders, Robertson with Ralph Reed, who runs the Christian Coalition, still does today, were going through their files and throwing papers on the floor, pulling stuff out of their files, saying, burn this, shred this, get rid of this, burn this, shred this. And the chief financial officer said to Ralph Reed, what are you guys doing? These are subpoenaed documents from the subpoenaed by the federal government. And so this is pure obstruction of justice. This is felony crimes piling on felony crimes. And Ralph Reed said, well, just put a gun to my head and blow my brains out. I mean, we're going to go to jail unless we get rid of these documents. And so that's how they operate.
How come no one prosecuted him? No one in the Democratic administrations looked into it.
Fear. Well, they did. The Justice Department asked for the documents, but why didn't they come after them? Now, I have to say that after I did my expose, several things happened. Number one, the Bank of Scotland dropped Robertson like a hot potato, especially when I pointed out that he called the Bank of Scotland the instrument of Satan. So the instrument of Satan dropped him as a partner. But also the IRS took away his 501c3. They did take away the charitable status of the Christian Coalition. Now, whether they ever went back and collected the money from the schmucks who gave him the $700 a year, that they can't deduct it off their taxes, I don't know what happened with that. I don't think anyone actually lost him. So Robertson didn't care. They just kept sending the money. It just was no longer officially tax deductible. So he didn't care.
Just in having this conversation, I'm sadder and sadder about the state that this one man, I mean, just thinking through not only the different presidencies that he has supported and what those presidencies has brought us to here in the United States, be it an Iraq war under Bush, be any number of foreign policy things, like the amount of blood on this guy's hands, plus the cultural cultural destruction that he's wrought.
Very, very important to understand his role in the culture wars. I mean, he's the guy who declared the culture war. He's the guy. I mean, there's all the other.
So it's very important that he's dead now. This is good.
Right. Well, except for one thing, an idea doesn't get buried.
Yeah, onward, carried on.
So he's the guy who said, for example, who began this crusade against LGBTQ rights and people. He said 9/11, the attack on the World Trade Center, the September 11th attack, was caused because God was unhappy. The Lord was unhappy that America was giving rights to gay people.
Because there's so many gays in the 9/11 building. I mean,
right. Well, it was the gays who caused it.
Yeah.
Who caused it? Who caused the Lord's wrath to come down upon the World Trade Center?
Right.
By the way, my office was. Obviously, I wasn't there at the time.
Thank goodness.
And so he began that war on culture. One thing he wasn't, by the way, was a racist. Unless you say that saying that Hindus are
right.
He had no problem with African Americans, again, because he was actually an organizer in Bed-Stuy in New York.
I
as a
mean,
young
the
man.
more you talk, I've been like, okay, who's this Antichrist? Is it Trump? Is it Putin? Which one? Where? Which one is the Antichrist? But the Antichrist, Lucifer, if you look in the story, right? He comes down good, right? He's like an angel, and then he's like, I'm going to turn to the dark side, and that sounds a lot like what we're talking about here. What? But you know, in all joking aside, what turned him? What do you have any idea what turned him from? Was it
Cash,
the money? Yeah.
cash. And I'll tell you what happened, because I spent a full day with the
Yeah,
reverend,
this is why I wanted to have you
or
on.
the defrocked, the ex-reverend, the unreverend. And he showed me a letter from his dad, who was very upset with his organizing and Bed-Stuy, like, what are you doing, etc. And he was very progressive and very much fought racism and income inequality. But then he ran into this woman. You don't know whether it was love of her bank account or love of her, but this older woman who took him to Virginia, and part of the deal was that he had to join her church and philosophy of born again Christians.
They're coming after
so very lucrative to say the least. So the Lord can be lucrative.
God,
when you're selling
it
pieces
saddens me greatly because, you know, this reminds me of a story. I think maybe you've heard me tell this before, but when the Pope came to New York City, Pope Francis came to New York City, a friend of mine got me a ticket, and I was like, I'm not going to miss this interesting cultural experience. So we went to the, he comes in a little Pope mobile, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people all in Central Park, standing there with pictures of relatives that are hurt, holding up a broken arm, just in their prayerfulness, just begging the Pope to put a blessing on them. And I'm thinking, gosh, if we could get these people out here to mobilize for, health care for all, they wouldn't need the Pope to fix the physical disorder. They would have actual health care. But just like it struck me, the desperate nature of human beings and how, just what's the word I'm looking for? The fragile nature of people's hearts and psyches and how easily people can be taken advantage of.
Sorry about that.
No problem. What do you think his,
well, look, when I was there at the 700 Club, so I mean, there's millions of people watching, but I'm in the, sorry, hang on.
After all these years, by the way, while you fix that, I wanted to say that, I mean, I've known about the 700 Club for years and years. And after all these years, I never knew that 700 was the amount of money you had to give, because I never watched it, because we were from Southern Italy, and my father would be like, the church, it's great to pray, but they're, corrupt. I mean, he was, he told me right off the bat, like, yeah, keep your faith, but not, just the church is corrupt. And so I just assumed that meant all the churches are corrupt.
Well, but there's a difference. I mean, you could say that maybe the church with all its holdings should give more of it to the poor. And of course, Pope Frankie has had a very progressive message.
That's true.
But Pat Robertson, there wasn't a sentence that came out of his mouth which didn't end with, call this number, praise the Lord, show your faith in the Lord by sending me money. Mm-hmm. And that was the deep evil of it. But then beyond saying, basically, pay me to pray for you. Pay me for this station.
The Catholics do that too. Let's not.
Yeah, well, I mean, but the other thing is,
they didn't cash in. Oh, well, actually, maybe they did. They just bought another church, another gold-plated toilet seat like they have at the Vatican. Anyway, don't get me off on that. Go ahead.
Yes.
What you're saying is very important.
This is also, remember that Pat Robertson ran these commercial enterprises, which were basically just pyramid schemes fleecing his flocks. This was the tragedy. People lost their homes. People lost it because they believed in this man. And then the second is that he ran this illegal scam of the Christian Coalition, where basically now America is wounded by this, by basically saying the Lord is a Republican. And not only that, but the Lord is a Republican because he wants to punish gay people He's also did say, of course, he was one of the people promoting the idea that AIDS was the Lord's punishment for homosexuality.
Right.
Even though
Hurricane. I remember saying I think he said
right.
Hurricane
And
Katrina was
Hurricane
because of the
Katrina
gays.
was also because of our cultural sins. And of course, this weird attack on Presbyterians and Hindus. Hindus, because they were the font of New Age philosophy, peace, love,
Not the
and
Buddhists?
understanding.
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
okay with the Buddhists.
Well, apparently they didn't wear all those fancy colors, just the saffron robes.
Colors.
There was
That's so
something
gay.
about the Hindu thing that disturbed him. It was, I think that the Iron Butterfly song, Inagata Davida, just got to him. But in talking to him, he, understand that he did, again, see that he was this voice of God, or at least that's what he was selling. Whether he believed it or not, I don't know, but he certainly found it to be lucrative. Why the Lord told him to cash in, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sad. I've seen, again, people being actually sad at his loss, but I'm sad. It just saddens me greatly how much damage one person can do.
Well, and it continues. That's the problem. What we have is the legacy of Pat Robertson. We can laugh about him fleecing his flock. We can laugh about his
Now Trump's
breaking the law. But the thing is, he's left us with this legacy of religious poisoning of our political system. It's not even a matter of separation of church and state. It's a matter of separation of politics and hate. Which we used to maintain. I mean,
you can hate on your private time.
Exactly. And your religion was not part of your politics. Now you have these guys endlessly professing their faith. And I was just at a Kerry Lake rally in Arizona. And because it wasn't boiling hot as it usually is in Arizona, that was the Lord was looking favorably upon Kerry Lake's candidacy, her attempt to overturn the gubernatorial election. And she doesn't explain, if the Lord's on her side, how she lost the governorship of Arizona. Well, she does say that the explanation is that the devil counted the ballots, that she like Trump, she says she actually won. This is the uber right-wing candidate for governor of Arizona on the Republican ticket, who lost to the Democrat in Arizona. So, the Democrats took both Senate seats and the governorship, Secretary of State in Arizona. So how could that happen? How could that possibly happen? Only if Satan is counting the ballots.
It's deeply disturbing that they've brought this religious conversation in, because if their side wins, those people are good, and the rest is Satan, not just people that disagree with you. And that kind of demonization of the other and othering is exactly what helps fascist dictators take over. So it's really disturbing.
It's very disturbing. And so while I hope you do read the article at gregpalast.com, Diamonds for the Antichrist, I do hope you read it. And there's, like you say, it's written with a lot of humor, but it's a tragic comedy for America, because we're still paying the price, no matter where Robertson is roasting right now.
I noticed a link on that article that you are voicing over one of my favorite of your books, Best Democracy Money Can Buy. Is it done? Is it already there?
Yes. So if you can download for free the audiobook, my first Best Democracy Money Can Buy, which was on the New York Times bestseller list for 9 months.
Awesome.
And you can get me, and I'm reading the book with some of our friends. I think the part about Pat Robertson, a lot of that was read by Al Franken, and that's probably why I got in trouble, is that Robertson zapped him. So we have Al Franken, Amy Goodman, Jello Biafra, Alec Baldwin, the late pre-armed, the late great Ed Asner, and some other wonderful people who are reading the book with me. So download for free the Best Democracy Money Can Buy at gregpalast.com.
gregpalast.com. Thank you so much for coming on the program. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I marvel at the work that you've done that has helped our country battle these insane forces. What are you working on now, FY?
Well, two things. I have, for those who've seen it before, the film Vigilante, Georgia's Vote Suppression Hitman. We're taking it national.
Ooh.
We're changing the film. My producer, George DiCaprio, and Martin Sheen. It's narrated by Rosario Dawson. So we're now, that's why I was in Arizona, because we're now taking it from Vigilante will now become America's Vote Suppression Hitman. And we're going to Texas, Arizona, Florida, Ohio, etc. So that's what we're working on, is how Trump could shoplift 2024, this new violence that is coming into our political system and intimidation. And that's what I'm writing about. We've got, so we'll talk about that when we'll talk about it when it comes out. And I'm also looking at, as you may be aware, that Leonardo DiCaprio is coming out with a new film about oil and the Osage Nation and the murders of the American natives to move them off oil property. Well, that was a story from the 1920s. I'm working with his dad, who's a great documentary filmmaker, on making a film about the theft of oil from the Osage Reservation by the Koch brothers from 1950 to 1988. They stole about $1.5 billion worth of oil from Osage and nearby indigenous properties. So that story these stories never end, no matter who gets buried. So it just never ends. So that's the price. That's why I'm with you, and we stay ever vigilant, and I can't take off my hat yet.
Please don't. Greg Palast, thank you so much for joining us here on the Political Voices Network. Appreciate it so much. Hi, everybody. Julianna Forlano here for the Political Voices Network. We hope you're enjoying Political Voices and all the content we provide on the daily. Now, there are a few new programs in the wings that are going to launch just in time for election season. If you're able and would like to help us continue bringing you all this content, please help support us by clicking the join button. We're going to have some perks for members, including early video release. You get the information first. Members only chat rooms, live shows, member badges, all the good stuff and more, all coming soon. So click that join button if you can to support us. And rest assured, we will continue to bring you all the great content you have known from the Political Voices Network and more. Thanks so much. See you soon.